Hi, and welcome to the Action Coaching Club training call. Tonight we're going to talk about how to write lots of great content fast. Hi, I'm Lou Dallo. Welcome. Glad to have you here. So I want to start just real quickly by defining what I mean by content. I guess the term has been bandied around a little bit, and this isn't the definitive sort of Wikipedia definition of the term or anything, but it's kind of the way I'm going to use it in the course of our conversation tonight. And I really mean any authoritative, educational, instructive information that you produce on your topic of expertise. That's what I'm going to call content. Okay, so whether you use it for blog posts, articles, social media. I'm just noticing here that you're not actually seeing my screen. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so whether you use it for blog posts, articles, social media content, your videos, your opt-in incentives, your teleseminars, web seminars, presentations, speeches, products, programs, workshops, seminars, whatever, it doesn't really matter as long as it's authoritative, educational, instructive information, right? So it's basically you being out there showing people that you know your stuff. And we're talking about content primarily today we're going to talk about really about creating the content and some structures and mindsets that help us create the various kinds of content fairly quickly. But that content in the end can be used for products or for content marketing purposes. You know, in our model, when we talk about the Freeline model of direct response marketing, it really is content marketing. What we're doing is we're creating great content as a way for people to sample us, or find out what we're all about and how much we know. And then that content actually serves as our marketing piece. Now, of course, we will have marketing collateral, sales letters, and sales videos and all that kind of stuff. And in a sense, that's content as well. But we're really not going to talk about that tonight. Tonight, we're referring to the thing that shows your authority off, or your knowledge or expertise around your subject area. Okay, so that's a little bit loose and informal, but I think we can all live with that, right? Now, content, when you look at it in terms of the internet, I think content is really the currency of the internet. So whether it's for organic search, whether it's for Google, whether it's for the aggregators, the news channels, the article directories, the video aggregators like YouTube and Video and Blip and all those kind of things, or whether it's just to give you content and visibility and reach on the net, this is your currency. This is an asset, a very real asset that you can trade for traffic in a sense, and you can trade for sales. And so it's a really important part of what we do in terms of our information marketing model. And so it's a very important currency online. Now, it also presents a certain crisis because there's so much information online, and because aggregators and blog writers and news directories and article directories and our prospects are just voracious about acquiring more and more and more content, it presents a little bit of a crisis for us in terms of answering the question, how do we produce enough content that is valuable and relevant to our audience? How do we produce it fast enough, and how do we make it a high enough quality that it achieves the goal of reaching out to our market and making ourselves known there as authorities, and then in turn bringing our market to us, to our websites and pages and our mailing lists and so on, so we have a chance to teach them, serve them, and have them enrolled and invest in our programs and products. The real crisis is one of overwhelm, and one of I hear a lot of, I'm running out of ideas, I don't know what to talk about, and or I hear the other one, which is, I have so many ideas, I don't know how to get them all out on paper in a way that makes sense. So it's a crisis. It's a crisis of making sure we have not just a lot of content, but a lot of content that's relevant and interesting to our market. And at the same time that we have a procedure or a mindset or a set of tools that helps us see how we can create kind of an endless stream of new pieces of content for our blogs, for our videos, for our workshops, for our seminars, for our speeches, and so on, and do it quickly and effectively enough so that we don't spend all our time doing nothing but producing content, because we want to be out there running a business and reaching our market as well. So in that sense, the content is also an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to learn a couple of frameworks and a couple of mindsets, some techniques that are going to help us to address this crisis and turn it into an opportunity by creating more and more great content that is relevant and interesting and in demand from our ideal prospects and customers, which we call the avatar, and reaches out and allows us to connect with and serve many, many more people by giving them a sample of our knowledge and our skills, our expertise, and our solutions, in the hopes that they'll come and want more and buy from us. So if we could just get on top of some of the challenges that create the crisis, then we can turn that into a very serious opportunity online for our business growth. So that's why I think it's really important to have this call tonight, because you're going to learn the top mindset techniques and tools that I've developed and that I've learned from Eben and that Eben teaches for creating valuable content that your market craves faster and more easily than ever before. So some of these things you may have heard in some of the other training, some of them maybe you haven't, because it's my own kind of spin based on implementation of some of these techniques. And actually it's really interesting, because some of the things that you're going to learn today, I learned by I guess you would call it what's that word, trial by fire. Right? Because I was not producing anywhere near as much content as I'm producing now. But when I started to sell my workshops and my programs in digital form, and when I started to take on this partnership with Eben to produce the coaching training and the coaching club, I suddenly found myself producing probably 10 times more content than I ever had before. And it was really interesting, because every week there was another training to be done. And it was a fascinating process to take what was in my head and apply the techniques and the tools that you're going to learn tonight, that I learned from Eben and from some of my other mentors, masters, and coaches. And now I feel relatively at ease and comfortable. I don't stress out anymore that 4 hours before our call on Monday night, that I can't put together a pretty good piece of content for you. A good training that's going to give you solutions, that's going to connect with you in the style that you most like to learn, and it's going to hopefully be chunked down enough, yet complete enough, that you can feel confident to implement it. So it's a really interesting process. What I'm sharing with you today is, in effect, sort of the culmination of my reflection back in the last 2 years, noticing how much more prolific and productive I've become by using the frameworks and the methods we're going to talk about today. In fact, I'll tell you how prolific it's become. I had to go buy a 16 terabyte hard drive to hold all of the videos that I created in the last few years for all my training programs, for my own and for Eben's, and for a couple of other partners that I'm doing. A year or two ago, I had a 1 terabyte drive, and it was half full. But my head was really full, right? Now my head's getting, well, it's still full, but but at least my hard drive is starting to catch up with what's in my head. So a really great thing, and a very positive thing for you to learn, because you'll find that you'll just do a lot more. You just have a lot more presence in the marketplace. Or in my case, I don't use the content primarily for marketing. I use it primarily for creating products. Either way, the techniques are going to really support you to do content marketing, if that's what you're into, or product development and seminars and workshops and so on, in a way that becomes relatively effortless for you. So we're going to learn about how to create content fast. Okay, so the first thing I need to say is you got to be a real expert. So a lot of people say, well, I don't know, what I'm going to say, what I'm going to talk about. Well, the secret here is that you're going to talk about what you know about. And so if you're looking to be an expert, a speaker, a trainer, a coach, an information provider, an authority, a service provider in a particular industry, it's no good saying, well, I don't know what to write about, because all the technique and frameworks and methods and structures in the world are not going to help you if you fundamentally don't know the material. And so there's a certain amount, I'm going to assume that you are a real expert and that you are learning your stuff every day, getting better and better at it, and you're learning and practicing and implementing and mastering the latest techniques and technologies that are relevant in your particular discipline, so that when you show up, whether it's prepared or not, you're going to feel comfortable and confident. In fact, if you can't find yourself talking for more than an hour about a particular topic, then either A, you don't know the stuff well enough yet, and that's okay. I mean, you've got to start someplace, and you can talk about what you know, but as soon as you can and as quickly as you can, develop as much skill and expertise as you possibly can so people feel safe when taking your advice or your guidance. Okay, so the fastest way I know to create content fast is to know what you're talking about and talk about what you know. Okay, so not a lot of people tell you that. You know, they focus on the techniques of, getting articles and some of the things we're going to talk about today, scraping content or getting inspiration or modeling stuff. But really, there's nothing like the real deal. And so I want you to think about being the real deal and just know your customers really well and provide a lot of solutions to them in the best way you can, and you will find that content is effortless. Now, the second part of that equation is your customer, right? So we talked about you need to become an expert. You need to become an expert in your technology, your processes, your skills, the things that you know about your topic area of expertise. But you also need to become an expert in your avatar, because the avatar rules everything we do when we create content. So we're not trying, I heard Eben once say, we don't want to fit the market to our expertise. We want to apply our expertise to the market. So it's really important when you're creating content, and this again makes it very effortless when you really know who it is you're serving and what problems they're trying to solve, what needs and desires that they're trying to achieve and manifest. It becomes kind of simple to choose what part of your vast range of expertise that you need to bring and to apply to the solution. So you think of yourself kind of as a library, right? You've got all of this information, all of these skills, all of these expertise, tools, processes, techniques, and so on. But you don't want to apply all of those to all of your avatars all the time. What you want to do is focus on the thing that's most important to your ideal prospect, whether it's eliminating a fear or frustration, or whether it's achieving a need or desire, and then use only those parts in your library that need to be applied to make that happen for your prospect or customer. So that removes the overwhelm of, oh my God, what do I need to talk about? I know all this stuff, but I have no idea which I need to bring to bear when I'm creating any piece of content. So as always, and we repeat this, and it becomes really the cornerstone of everything that we do in this group, is we always want to know our customer, our ideal customer. We call it the avatar. We want to know who they are. We want to know the persona, their profile, their behaviors, their values, their fears, frustrations, their needs and desires, so that we can bring content that helps them to do that. Suddenly our content becomes interesting and relevant to them without our even trying. So the mindset I want you to take on is to just know that your expertise, experience, knowledge, process, systems, all those things are, I don't know if that should be is or are, forgive my grammar here, but are not as important as the outcome, solution, and result that you help your prospect or buyer create. So I really love the phrase that Eben says that in a way our products are obstacles for our clients. You think about this sometimes. I see this all the time when people are writing sales letters and I'm working with them to tweak their copy. And very often what they're talking about is the product, right? This product does this and this product does that, and look at all my skills and look at all my expertise, and I can do this and I can do that. And ultimately I say, yeah, but what does that mean to the buyer? Oh, it means that they're going to achieve that outcome. Oh, great. Well, say that, say that that's what's going to happen for them. Or, they focus on, it's got, 3 CDs and 4 books of transcripts, and it's got, 18 hours of video. And, there's a place for that. But if that's all you say, and you don't say it's going to help you get rid of this problem, or it's going to help you achieve this desire, all of the stuff that you talk about in terms of look at all the videos and look at all the transcripts and look at all the hours of DVDs, see, they just become more work that the client has to do to accomplish the outcomes that they desire. So we don't want to focus on our stuff. We don't want to focus on our process, our techniques, our tools, how many DVDs. It's irrelevant in a sense to the buyer or to our prospect. They just want to know can I help them? Can we help them to accomplish their outcome or to eliminate their problems? And if so, then our products and we then we and our products become relevant and valuable and an easy yes for that client. So whenever you're creating content, come to it always from the point of view of how does this help my client achieve their outcomes, right? So connect all of your content to something that your customer wants or needs. Now, this is kind of tough because when we know as much as we do about our material and our content, we sometimes go into the mode of telling them what they should do or what they could do, or here's what could have avoided it, or this could have been, you need to go on a diet. You can't go on a diet. You have to change your lifestyle and go into preventative mode. And you know what? There's a time for that, because if we're responsible and we're giving responsible advice, we do want to make people aware of that. But first, we have to clear their biggest focus. We have to if they're constantly obsessed with eliminating a problem or creating an outcome, we will not have their attention, and we will not be able to influence them in any way until we help them to do that. So put our egos and our expertise and everything that we know aside, and provide the value to the client, and apply only those things in our content and our solutions that help them to accomplish what they want. And then that opens up the space, creates a liking, a trust, authority, reciprocity, and so on, that allows us to then open up the new conversation about the longer term benefit or the advanced solution for them. So I'm going to talk tonight. So I was thinking a lot about how we're going to go about this tonight, and I thought, well, we could spend a lot of time on tools, techniques. We spend a lot of time online and looking at article banks and all this kind of thing. We could talk about how to actually create the product and outsource and blah blah blah. And then I thought, you know what? Ultimately, all that stuff we could do a little bit later, because probably the most important thing here is going to be about mindset and some of the technique that's going to help you turn what you know into solving the customer problem in a way that you can communicate it easily and effectively. So the thing I want to focus on the most, and that's been the most helpful for me, is what we refer to as frameworks. And we're going to get a little bit into tools and resources and techniques and all that kind of stuff. But really, the big takeaway for us tonight, at least I'm hoping that you'll see it that way, is how frameworks can support you to create content quickly. Now, of course, again, that's assuming you know your stuff and you know your avatar. So what frameworks does is it helps you to overcome that dreaded blank page syndrome. The one, well, it used to be on a typewriter when writers would put the page in the typewriter and roll it up and clamp it into place and put their hands on the typewriter keyboard and then realize they have absolutely no idea what to write, right? And we've all been caught with that, except nowadays, of course, it's on the screen. I guess I should have called it the blank screen syndrome. But when you use a framework, it's a great jump starter. It's an igniter to ideas and to conversations. So and the great thing about frameworks is that it'll help you to synthesize everything that you know and structure it in a way that it will connect with as many different communication styles as possible. So there are some psychology issues. There's some psychology around how people learn, and there's some psychology about personalities and behaviors and so on, that if you know them, and you create content in such a way that it appeals and filters through those learning styles and communication styles, then you're going to reach as many people as possible in your audience, and you're going to be able to teach and influence as many people as possible. And the other thing that I found is that it endows your content with a structure that implies authority. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means it makes your stuff look like you really know what you're talking about. So this occurred to me when we were in Colorado for a mastermind meeting with Jeff Walker and the product launch managers down there, and in the process, somebody was talking about one of my frameworks, one of my favorite frameworks, the one that we talk about here a lot, which is the why, what, how, what, if. And so I taught people in the room about it, and then Jeff sort of took it on and role played it, and just completely off the cuff. He followed the framework and the structure and put a 10-minute training together on the fly about how to learn guitar and why it's important to learn a guitar, and what the F chord means and what impact. I mean, it was just great. And the one thing that struck me is how everybody in the room said, "Jeff, that sounds like you've been thinking about it forever." You know, and more importantly, it sounded like he actually knew what he was talking about. And if you know Jeff, love him to death, but he'll tell you he's not the greatest guitar player on the planet, right? He struggles a little bit with it. He loves it, but he's no Jimi Hendrix. So to hear him teach that content, you would have thought this guy's a studio musician. I mean, he just knows his stuff dead to rights. And so it struck me in that moment that one of the great things about these frameworks, and especially the one we're going to focus on, is that it makes your stuff sound really good. It makes it sound, whoops, what happened here? Why am I no longer the presenter? That's interesting. One sec, I had a little glitch here. Okay, I think we're back. Don't know what happened there. I got bounced as the presenter. Okay, so anyway, make a long story short, it makes your stuff sound like you really know what you're talking about, and it reaches people in whatever learning style or communication style they are predominantly that they predominantly favor. So, okay, let's talk about some of these frameworks. Did I miss a slide? Let me see. Nope, looks okay. Okay, so one of the most popular frameworks, this is actually my favorite framework, is, it's called a lot of different things by a lot of different people, but essentially it's the 4 learning styles model from David Kolb. Now, in our language, we call it simplistically the why, what, how, what if model. And the reason for that is because if you sort of break it down into simple terms, you can sort of identify that 4 questions that people predominantly tend to ask as they're learning something, and that all of us as a collective are going to be one of these 4 learning styles. Now, not exclusively, right? Because we all have probably a little bit of all of them, but we will probably favor one of those styles. So the why learner, we'll talk about these, but the why learner wants to understand why they should listen to the content and what's in it for them. The what learner wants to know, what is it we're talking about? What is it going to do for me? What is this thing, and what does it mean to me? How did it come about? What's the deal? The how learner wants to know, how do I implement this? Step by step, give me a recipe. And then the what if learner wants to know, well, what if I put this into action? What happens in my life? What results will I get? How does it work? And so what we want to do in our content is we want to present our content in that order. And if we do that, we'll connect with the most number of people in the audience. Now, the great thing about this is that I've used it anywhere from small pieces of content like blog posts, articles, emails, and so on, all the way through to entire 30-day coaching programs and 30-day workshops that I've developed. And of course, I've seen Eben use it when he's created his seminars. It's a really powerful framework. Now, it isn't exclusively, it's not that cut and dry where you just follow step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, but in a way it is. But also, you're going to learn that you can interweave different frameworks, and you can also interweave this framework within itself. So in other words, in the how section, every step of your recipe can include why, what, how, what if, right? So as you get a little bit more comfortable with it, you're going to find ways to introduce it all throughout your content. But if you can just follow the why, what, how, what if, this is one of the most powerful article writing and blog post writing techniques and frameworks I've ever seen. And then if you just sort of blow it out, go into more detail, you'll have a report. And then blow it out and go into a little bit more detail. You have a teleseminar, and blow it out and go in a little more detail. Now you'll have a product. So let's talk a little bit more about this. So the 4 learning styles. So we have the why learner. Okay. So, and this is the person that you want to speak to first in your content, because they're the ones that until they understand why, there's no point telling them anything else, because they're not interested yet. So the question is, why should they read, listen, or watch this piece of content? In other words, what's in it for me is what they're asking. So you'll want to begin your content, and think about this almost as your headline, but you'll want to begin your content by sharing with folks what's in it for them. If you learn this technique, you will be able to accomplish X, Y, and Z. If you don't, your business will fail, or you won't lose any weight, or you'll probably have a heart attack. So if you want to live a long, healthy life, if you want to, lose the weight, and avoid the worry of a heart attack, enjoy your family and your health forever, then this could be the most important article you've ever read. Okay, so it's a great way to start off. Now, we talked a little bit about, some of the key motivators for people are achievement, affinity, and power and influence. And so in the beginning, when you're talking about why, if you can relate it back to what it will do for them in terms of getting more power or influence, or avoiding the loss of power or influence, or you can tell them that by learning this, they'll be connected to a larger group, a bigger community. They'll be part of a bigger family, a tribe. And if they don't, then and avoid being isolated or shunned by that tribe. And also accomplishment and achievement. Some people will want to know that if they learn this technique and master it, they will achieve the outcomes that they desire. And not learning this technique could create failure to achieve that, and the associated emotions with it. So when you're talking about why, is a great time to start also introducing, when you can't always think about the specific benefits, go to achievement, affinity, power, and influence, and think about how learning this will move them closer towards one of these three outcomes, or will either will prevent them from moving away from one of those three outcomes. And that usually helps to craft the opening in that case. You don't always have to do that, but when you're looking for a way to really valueize it, remember that those are three motivators for people. And so if you appeal to all three motivators, moving towards those three, and not moving and moving away from the loss of those three, then you're going to cover the 4 learning styles plus the 3 motivator styles. The person who wants to know wants to know, what is this content teaching? What's the concept? What's the history? What's the impact? And also, this is a really good one to include, what mistakes should I avoid? Actually, I would probably put that in the how. So certainly you want to tell people, what impact it has, and therefore what you want to avoid. In other words, what happens if I don't do this? What's the outcome? But this is all about understanding, what we're dealing with, what the impact is, what the history is, what happened to create this, what happens if we don't eliminate it. It's all the scientific, logical kind of, and can be also very emotional, obviously, right? Because the impact can be very emotional. But this is all about what this thing is that they're going to learn, and what it does, how it came to be, and so on, right? So for me, in fact, in my learning style, this is the one that's hardest for me. This is the one that I have to work on the most to write about, because it tends to be the farthest away from me. I tend to be primarily a how and then a what if person. And so and you should know this, that because you will be predominantly one style over another, probably, that you'll tend to favor writing and creating content in that particular style. And so you want to work a little extra harder to make sure that you also accommodate the other learning styles, which may not feel as natural to you. Okay, so this is the one that Evan is particularly strong at, and Jeff Walker is also a what kind of guy in my experience, and so on. And it's really fascinating to see that, once they know what this thing is, they don't need to know how it's done. Somebody else can do it, right? But they just need to know what it is, and also a little bit of why should I, what's in it for me? What if? So a lot of entrepreneurs tend to be what if and what people, and more sort of engineering type people tend to be how learners. And so it's also interesting that when they present, if you watch an engineering presentation, you'll see a lot of details and technology and step-by-step and analysis and so on. Whereas if you hear a presentation from an entrepreneur or I guess I would say a teacher, but not like an engineering teacher, but someone who's a motivator, let's say a motivator, an entrepreneur, visionary, they're not going to be in the how very much, right? They're going to be mostly in the what if and the what. And so if you're a how learner, you're listening to a CEO talk, part of your brain is going to shut down and go, when's he going to, yeah, great vision, when's he going to tell me how we're going to do it? And if you're a what or a what if person, if you're an entrepreneur, and you're listening to an engineering presentation talk to you about the algorithm to make Windows work, then you're probably either going to fall asleep or run out of there. So you want to be aware of that, that you tend to be predominantly one learning style, and you want to make sure that you incorporate 4 learning styles into your content. And then, of course, we talked about the how person. Of course, this is the person who wants to know, how do I put this into action? What's the specific action sequence that I want to use so that I implement this thing that I just learned? Okay, so for this person, you're going to have very specific, step by step. Do this first, watch for this outcome, make this correction. Do this next, watch for this outcome, make this correction. If you've accomplished this, continue. Very recipe-like in terms of the this particular learning style, because they want to put it into action. And they want to know exactly how to do it. Now, they may get creative later about modifying what they do and so on, but for them, the learning, the understanding, the value of it is in knowing how to make it happen. Okay, now this is also a good point, a good place where you may want to talk about how not to fail, right? Like what not to do so that you avoid a catastrophe. So it's as important to show them what to do as it is what not to do. And that's because, again, some people are towards thinkers and some people are away thinkers. And so action steps that only show you what to do are not going to appeal to those people who want to know, what do I need to do to make sure that things don't go wrong? Okay, so this is a really nice twist to add into the how sequence. And by the way, at this point, we go up a little bit back to the what learning style. Here's also a good time to talk about some of the other frameworks we're going to refer to later, which is sort of the emotional, physical, mental game. So what's going on in your head that makes this thing happen? What's going on emotionally? What is it that happens to you emotionally when this event happens, or when this technique is put into place? And what physically do you feel, or what physically do you do in the face of these things, right? So we have the psychological component, right? That's the visual audio kinesthetic as well. So that's part of how you deliver the content in as many modalities as possible. But when you're talking about what, you can certainly bring in the inner game, the emotional game, and then the outer game, which is the physical game, right? And when you talk about physical, of course, you're going to start moving into the how again. But we'll talk a little bit about that. But what I'm doing is I'm introducing to you actually a few other frameworks and showing kind of where in the main framework you might introduce them. So remember when we were talking about the why, we said you want to also bring in the motivators, the achievement, the achievement, the affinity, and the power and influence. Well, in the what, you can bring in the inner game, the outer game, and the emotional, physical, mental game. And then in the how, this gets very specific. In the how, you're going to think about the framework of visual, audio, kinesthetic. And that's an NLP technique that says we learn by seeing, by hearing, and by doing. And the more elements of those that you can bring in to the how process, the better. So people can hear you teach them how to do it. They can see a checklist or a presentation or a slide, and then maybe you do an exercise or a workshop to have them actually do the things that you teach them. And then you're appealing to the how learners. You're teaching them what to do and what not to do, and you're giving them a visual, auditory, and a kinesthetic experience of it. And that's why so often when we say, write it down, don't just hear it, don't just think it. Like at the end of the call, put this down, and I'll often say to you, write down what you learned, because that brings in the visual and the kinesthetic element to your learning, right? So those are things that you want to think about bringing in, and we'll talk a little bit more about them. But essentially, just remember the third part of the learning style is, how do I put this into action step by step? And then the fourth part, and it's often a really great way to transition into a conclusion to your presentation, is what if, right? So what happens if I apply what I learned in the various parts of my life? What new experiences do I get? What new outcomes can I expect? And this is where the entrepreneur likes to put things into action and see what happens. Now, what you'll find is that there's also a part of this learning style. I forget which is the experiential and which is not, but the how learner doesn't need to actually go out and test it. They're comfortable in the lab figuring stuff out. But the what if learner doesn't have the patience to go through the algorithm and learn it. He wants to put it out there in the real world and use real world feedback to figure out whether it's working or not, or how to tweak it. Okay, so that too is a little bit different. So you want to project someone into the real world and have them imagine what happens? What can they expect? What is the reason they want to go out and apply this in the real world? Will they lose weight? Will they attract more partners? Will they make more money? Will their life be easier? Will they be on the beach living a lifestyle of freedom? All of those things are part of the what if learning style, right? So as you create content, and again, there are 4 sections here. Remember that you can make this an opt-in page. In fact, it's a great technique for an opt-in page. So your headline becomes the why, the first paragraph or 2 becomes the what, the bullet points become the how, and the what if becomes, think of all the stuff you're going to get if you opt into this for this report. So it doesn't have to, we're not talking about everything has to be a major stage production here. It can be as simple as an opt-in page that you apply this to. So we talked about some other frameworks as we went through this, and let's just talk about some of them a little bit. So this is always interesting to bring in the concept of an emotional physical game, sort of like the inner game and the outer game. So when we're teaching a concept, it's often really interesting to talk about what's going on in your head that creates this experience, and what can you do to change the way you talk to yourself, or the way you perceive that issue, or the way you think about it, so that it changes what happens in the outer reality, right? So you might say, for example, self-made wealth, right? So a lot of people have interesting relationships with money. Some people think that there's a scarcity of money. Some people think that you have to work hard for money. Some people, there's all of these beliefs. But, if you look at the difference in the inner game or the beliefs from people who don't have money or who are struggling, and compare that to the people who are very wealthy and who are and have no end to the amount of income they can create, you'll see that they tend to have beliefs that say, I don't have to work, I can leverage other people's time. It's not difficult to make money, I just need to have a great idea. They think about things like, it's not about how much I can get from the market, it's about how much value I can bring to the market. And then you can talk about how that changes the actions they take and what results it creates, and then you can go step by step, right? So now you bring the why, what, how, what if into this process. So the inner game is the what, the outer game is also part of the what happens. The how is, how do you change your inner game? What specific steps can you take so that you start thinking and adopting the values of the wealthy? And then the what if is, so what happens to your outer game as a result? What new wealth and riches and freedom will you manifest as a result of this change in your inner game? So that's an interesting framework to come from too. And if you're like me and you like to know how the brain works and how we're motivated and what psychology we succumb to the most, this is a really interesting framework to write your content on. And to me, like inner game, outer game is also when you talk specifically, break it down into the inner game being the emotional, mental aspect, and then the outer game being the physical aspect. So it's kind of related. It's also part of another framework that Evan refers to as going from theory to practice. So the theory is to understand in concept, if we were to do this, here's what we would expect to happen. So let's follow these steps and put it into practice, and then here's what we can expect to happen. So are you hearing still that it goes from the why, what, how to the what if, right? But the theory part of it is the why and the what, right? This is all about the concept, the model, the science behind it, and so on and so forth. The action steps then show you how to put it into practice, and then the what if is, once you put it into practice, here's the results that you can accomplish. So if you're wondering what to write about during the what phase, you can think about writing about the emotional, physical, mental part of the what. You can think about the inner game and how that manifests in the outer game, and you can also think about the theory of the topic that you're writing about, the science behind it, the theory behind it, the model, the abstract, the construct, and so on. That sort of explains. It's sort of like the model of the atom in quantum physics, right? It's not the real thing, but it kind of explains, it gives you an idea of how subatomic particles might interact. And then you can go into the subatomic, what do they call that thing where they, fire away at atoms and they break the electrons and the neurons and, they go flying. Fisher. Okay, so whatever it is, obviously I'm no physicist, you can tell, but you get the idea, right? So in the one, you're talking about the theory, the concept, the model, the abstract ideas, and then you move them to here's how you can actually put it into practice, and then of course here's what you can expect as a result of that. Now, some other frameworks I really like, and these are like really easy to do when you're in a big hurry to create content. Like if somebody was going to interview you on the radio and they said, and you were completely caught off guard, I call this like the Oprah test, right? If Oprah said, hey, I've got 10 minutes to talk to you, what do you want to talk about? This is a great thing to do. Just take the top 3, 5, 7, 10, whatever you could, whatever you have time for, of your best tips, tricks, and secrets, write them down. Do a little why, what, how, what if for each one, and you're good to go. You're done. You've got anywhere from 50 seconds to 50 minutes of content right there. So the format is the top X, and X can be 3, 5, 7, 10, 12, 21. I've seen them used. I've seen all of them used. Actually, I did an experiment. I went into Google and I looked for lists, and I looked for the best, the top, the best, the most, and so on, and it looked like 10 was the most popular. Like if you look for top 10 list in Google, you're going to find like 5 times, 10 times the results of the top 5 or the top 7 things. So 10 seems to be a great number for a list if you're going to make it in that kind of framework. But if you're teaching, more content, then think about it. That you remember that old rule about we could only keep 7 plus or minus 2 things on our minds at any given time. So I usually, think that if you have 7 or less significant points in your content, and each one of them will either have a why, what, how, what if, or it may in and of itself have 2 or 3 action steps, you're going to have lots of stuff. So I recommend you think about somewhere, the top 3. The big 5 or the big 7, but don't usually, unless you're doing like a teleseminar where you're just going to go, okay, I'm going to give you my top 10 tips or my top 12 tips, and you're talking 2 minutes about each of them. But most of the time, you can look at 7 plus or minus 2 things, and that means 7 or less according to the numbers we're using here. And by the way, you notice we're not using 8 or 9, right? Because those numbers just don't seem to really convert in terms of headlines or titles or whatever. So then you could say, well, the top what? Well, you're going to talk about the best, the deadliest, the most critical, the massive, the little known, the insider. What? Well, insider tips, tricks, tests, mistakes, secrets, ways that whatever, fill in your avatar. So inside these square brackets, it means like choose one or fill in the blank for it, right? So this might be something like the top 7 critical mistakes that every entrepreneur makes, and what to do about it and how to avoid them. Okay, see how I'm working my way through that? Or you could say that the 3 most critical tricks every dieter needs to know about to lose weight healthfully, and how to avoid it and what to do about it doesn't match, but you might say, and where to get this information, and where to get this little known information. Oh, little known is another great one, right? The top 3 little known secrets every doctor knows about how to make you lose weight healthfully, and how to get it from them, those kind of things. So you can mix and match these things, but you'll get the hang of it as you roll these off your tongue. Typically, I go for the top 7 or top 10. I like things like little known or insider. I don't go for deadly and critical myself necessarily, but I like because I like things that make you feel like I'm going to teach you something you can't find anywhere else. So that happens to be my favorite. And then secrets or tips or strategies or mistakes are the ones that I tend to go with. And then from there you could use it however you want. Now, if you create a title that says, the top 7 critical mistakes every entrepreneur makes, and how to avoid them, well, what's your content going to be about? Well, just write down 7 of what you think are the most critical mistakes. Talk about why they need to know about this mistake. Talk about what the mistake is and what happens in their life when they make this mistake, what happens in their business when they make their mistake, what happens to cause that mistake psychologically in the first place, and what they can do to change that. Here are the steps, 1, 2, and 3, and then move on to tip 2, and then tip 3, right? So you just kind of answer your questions in your mind. You ask yourself those questions: why, what, how, what if, and you do it for what you identify to be the top 7 topics of interest, and boom, you've got your content produced. Okay, now you may also want to mix and match these, so you might have the top 5 methods, and then each method has 5 steps for implementation, right? So you could add, the 3 phases, and in each phase there are 5 steps, and then each step you talk about the why, what, how, what, if, or the inner outer game. Or one of the other frameworks. So kind of see how they all kind of mix and match in there. And what I like to do is just have a list of this. You can type out this list and print it on your tape it to your filing cabinet, to your wall, to your computer, to whatever. And you have this in front of you as you're writing, and it's just a great tool to stimulate your thinking. And what I found is if you think about it as though somebody were asking you those questions, it gets easier, because when I'm thinking about what do I need to tell someone, it gets a little bit more challenging for me. It gets easier when I imagine that, my favorite interviewer, well, let's say Oprah, what the heck, not that I necessarily think that I want to be an Oprah, but let's say Oprah was in front of me asking me these questions, then it becomes easier for me to just talk in response to answering a question like I'm being interviewed. And it helps me to sort of get out of my logical mind and start to create content on the fly and record it, okay, which is something we're going to talk about a little bit later. Okay, so the Top X framework is another great framework. Another one that you can use, and this works a lot when you're doing sales presentations, is problem, solution, action, results. And you may be familiar with the old PSAR acronym, and this is where you start out by describing what the problem is, and again the why and the what can be a big part of this. What the problem is, how it came to be, what does it mean to experience this problem, and then you could even aggravate it a little bit, like really dig deep into, if you don't get rid of it, here's what's going to happen, and here's what happens to a lot of people if they don't get it handled, and here's what you could have as an outcome if you do get it handled, and and here's why you should get it handled. And then the solution basically is, here's if you take the following steps. The solution is actually more about painting the picture of what life looks like after the problem is solved. So if you apply this solution, and if you create, if you follow my program and you apply the solution, you follow my advice, you're going to lose weight, make more money, have more life, whatever, find the love of your dreams, whatever that might be. And then you get into the action, which is, so here's exactly what I need you to do right now. So the solution can be, the detailed how, or it can be just just talking about what it looks like to have the problem solved, and then the action can be the detailed steps. Or, for example, in a sales call, the solution is the actual detailed steps and the recipe, and then the action is go buy my stuff, right? So you create the problem, you go into the why and the what, you create the solution, again, the why and the what, and possibly a little bit about the how. The action is, here's what you need to do right now, and then the results, guess what? Sounds a little bit like the what if, doesn't it? Here are the results you're going to see, here's what it's going to mean to you, here's what you can expect, here's why it's important to you to do these, here's how to get it done faster than ever before, so on and so forth. And so very similar to the why, what, how, what, if, but with a slightly different focus, because you're talking about a specific problem or set of problems, and then the solution to those problems oftentimes is, of course, your product or service. And I mentioned this before, and I think it's still one of my favorite ways of doing this is to be interviewed, is just to, pretend I'm at a bar talking to people who are really interested in the subject. And, do you ever have this experience? You go to a conference, you meet some people, you're all interested in whatever the subject is that you guys are all experts on. You go to the bar or in a restaurant, you start talking about it, and you're all just talking about your stuff, talking about, everything that and you're excited to share it. And somebody asks you 3 or 4 questions, and boom, 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 you've got all the answers at the tip of your fingers. And don't you sometimes say to yourself, God, I wish I would have recorded that because it's great content. I don't know about you, I do that all the time. So, this is one of my favorite ways of doing this. Sometimes I will literally call a friend of mine and say, listen, here's a bunch of questions, interview me. And sometimes I'll ask the questions or I'll prepare the questions, sometimes I won't. And many times I'll do this in group coaching. I'll just say, okay, here's what we're talking about. Ask me anything you want to know about this subject. And then as they ask, I find myself kind of thinking through and providing solutions, and then, acting. When I get out of my I'm a writer mode and I go into I'm a coach or I'm a teacher or I'm a solution provider, I'm a businessman mode, I'm a lot more creative. And so that's what being interviewed does for me. It puts me into that mode of problem solving creatively rather than thinking about how should I say this, what's the right thing to do, what sequence should I write this in, blah, 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 blah. I'm completely out of my mind and I'm in the mode of, okay, I'm going to help you the best way I know how, and then just let the ideas flow. So that's one of my personal favorites. And you can write the questions out in advance, or you can get your coaching group or your friends, or just invite people on your list and say, I want to know your most important questions. Like, what are your biggest problems or challenges around this issue? Losing weight, finding your soulmate, whatever it might be. And be sure to record it, because you may find yourself being so inspired and coming out with sheer gems of wisdom, instances of brilliance, and that you'll be very happy that you recorded. And then the other way that you can create content, and this is not necessarily your content, but you could be the interviewer, and you can record and transcribe everything, and guess what? You're still creating great content for your list, right? Okay, more frameworks. So this is a good one too. Modules, phases, and milestones. Especially when I'm doing something like a 30-day workshop, it really is helpful to think about it in terms of modules, phases, and milestones. So, we're just in the process now of doing the video sales letter workshop. When we started thinking about how to do this, we said, well, what do we need to do to get people to have their video sales letter done online and getting traffic? Well, so we thought the first thing we need to do, we need to have a research phase. Okay, and the research phase is where they do the avatar, they do the research about the market, they find out what the hot buttons are, they find out who the competitors are, they find out what the hot buttons are, and then they create the big promise, for this thing, and so on and so forth. And then then they move out of that phase. So the milestone is that they have these things, done, that they've answered who the avatar is, they know who the hot button is, they know the market, and they've got their big idea. And then the next phase is, okay, we want to create the video, we want to script it, we don't want to actually create it, we want to develop the content for the video sales letter. And then we walk them through. In that phase, in order for you to move to the next phase, where you're actually going to produce the video, you need to have the script written, you need to have the storyline done, you need to have all the, and we walk them through all the things they need to have done, and that becomes the step-by-step of phase 2. Then they have that done, then we move into phase 3, which is, okay, so now this is the production phase, and then we teach them the technology that they need and the techniques that they need to employ and all the rest of it, and we again walk them through step by step to implement that. And then we have the traffic phase. Okay, here's how to drive traffic, right? And so there are 4 distinct phases, and each one of those phases has a milestone, an outcome. What do they have to have completed before it makes sense for them to enter the next phase? This is a great way to develop a lot of your training and programs. And I sometimes think of it as a 4-phase or 4-module program is kind of like a 4 DVD set, more or less. And each one is self-contained and accomplishes what has to happen in this part of the sequence. So it's instead of saying here are your 150 steps for you to do, you could say here are the 10 steps that you need to complete in this module. Here are the 6 steps you need to complete in this module. And when we complete modules 1 and 2, then we reach milestone 1. Now they may have completed 40 steps, but it feels like 3 to them, right? And so this is a really great way to develop bigger programs. And then within each one of them, as I mentioned, you can have a self-contained training using any of the other frameworks. So a module may consist of, a number of different phases, and each phase may consist of a why, what, how, what, if module, and each why, what, how, what, if could include some mental, emotional, inner, outer game, and so on, okay? But it starts with the idea of modules, phases, and milestones. And this is particularly good when you know what people need to do and you know the sequence that they need to follow to get it done. So you're kind of like their coach and project manager, and you break your content and training into step by step by step. Another great place for this is when you want to do, for example, an autoresponder sequence. It's a great time to think about modules, phases, and milestones. Or if you want to do an article series or a video series, or a teleseminar, series that you could do over 3 weeks. So it's really helpful to look at the journey that you're taking people from where they are today and where they're going to be after they learn from you, and breaking it up into milestone A, milestone B, milestone C, and then within each one have a nice small self-contained training. And then you can celebrate sort of leaving one phase and entering the next. And that's a way to really reinforce to people that they've accomplished what they're learning, that they're learning it, they'll feel successful. So you're acknowledging their mastery and their learning, which makes it more likely that they're going to learn and master the rest of your stuff as you go along. So this is a really cool way to look at, at developing your training products and services. Another one that some folks like to use, I don't use this a lot, but it's an interesting way to look at it, which is past, present, and future. So, you know, what were you doing in the past that got you to where you are now? What were your thoughts? What were your beliefs? What were your actions? You know, what was your experience? What was your conditioning? And so on and so forth. And look at where you are today. As a result of that, here's what's happening today. And, you know, so the reason you're here today is because of all that happened. And now that you're here, here's what's happening. Here's your current, you know, you're overweight, you're tired, you're depressed, you can't go to work, you're not making friends, your social life is awful, and you know you're just not making the progress you want in your life. So if you follow my success recipe, here's what the future will look like for you. Okay, and then you talk about that, and then of course somewhere in there between present and future, you're going to say, and all you need to do is follow these steps, A, B, C, and D. So again, you're talking about the past, present, and future. These are really great opportunities to bring in the mental, emotional, physical, the outer, inner game things as well. And of course, when you're talking about how do you go from present to future, that's a great place to now interject either a top 3, a top 7, top 10, or a why, what, how, what if module, right? So, so all of these things can work together. And by the way, a great way to do this so that you can see it visually is to use a mind map. Mind map is an awesome tool for looking at your frameworks and kind of mixing and matching them and see where they kind of work together nicely. Another framework that I like for creating content is the case study or the story. You know, you talk about someone's story. You talk about, for example, if it's a client, a case study about where they were before you helped them and where they are now after you've helped them. And so you tell the story, and that's always good because, first of all, it's a great social proof, right? It's a third-party acknowledgement of your authority. Because I mean, ideally, you're, you know, you created the case study, you were responsible for it, for the outcome. So the case study is great, and also it gets people to sort of suspend the disbelief because it's not you talking about the results you were able to accomplish. It's someone talking about their story and their success, and you're just kind of there to sort of celebrate and acknowledge their win. But of course, the value that you bring to it is you can now go back and analyze it. Excuse me, and you can analyze it in terms of, you know, inner game, outer game, mental, physical, emotional, the what, the why, you know, what created it, how did it happen to be, all those things you can bring into your analysis and the top 3 things that made it work and the top 3 things that were avoided. And that maybe even the top 3 mistakes that did happen and how to avoid them if you do this. And that becomes the lessons. And of course, then you show them the 1, 2, 3 steps for exactly what they need to do if they want to implement it themselves. So this is a great framework. This comes very intuitively. And also remember that what you're talking about in the analysis, what you're talking about in the action steps and so on, the case study should again connect to what your avatar wants to accomplish, right? So it's not just any story of success that someone created, but it's a story of success that someone created that your avatar also wants to create, that they can then relate to that person, saying that person's like me, and if they could do it, I could do it, and you know, get a sense of hope and inspiration from them and learning. Okay, so that when you give them the action steps and the how-tos and the lessons and the why and the what-ifs, all that stuff makes sense because it's relevant to them. It's something that they too desire to either eliminate or accomplish. Now, when I'm doing, oh, this wrapped around, so we're going to have a little bit of a weird looking screen here in a second. But so when I'm doing something like a 30-day workshop, and we talked about this before in terms of milestones and gates and so on, but I do something that's kind of really interesting, and I don't know, I think I've done this all my life, but and I've heard Evan talk about it too, so I know I'm not like nuts. It's not just me, you know, this is a way that seems to work very well, but I actually do things in a weird way. Excuse me, I have to cough here for a second. I'm sorry about that. I've been flat on my back sick for the last 3 days, so I'm struggling a little bit here. So I call it sort of deconstructive creation, constructive presentation. And it's, you know, I don't know what that means. It's just a phrase that in my mind means that I start with the end in mind, I break it down backwards, and then I put it together and deliver it going forwards. So what do I mean by that? Well, okay, I apologize that it's not too clear here on the screen, but what this is saying is start with the avatar's biggest fears, frustrations, needs, and desires. So we always want to start there, right? We're not just doing content for the sake of, making ourselves happy and putting content out there. We want to have content that's going to be valued by and desired by our avatars. And so if it helps them accomplish something that they want, then the content is relevant. The outcome is significant and likely to be in demand, which is what we want, especially if we're going to ask them to invest in a product or service. So the first thing I would do then is start with the avatar's biggest fears, frustrations, needs, and desires, and then I actually define the how-to. I say, like, what are the steps that I would recommend if I were coaching that person, if I were working with them? What are the steps that I would recommend? What are the milestones that I would want them to accomplish? What are the tools and techniques and resources that they would need? And so I work out all of the how-to, because then that helps me figure out, do I need a top 7? Do I need a module? And very often it works out in that kind of training that it tends to be sort of a module or phase-based kind of approach. But we start with the end in mind. What is it we want to help that's important for that avatar to accomplish? What's our best strategy, our best technique, and how do we make it easier, faster, less expensive for them to accomplish that? And then I work backwards from that and say, well, what would the prospect need to know before they were able to implement that? Do they need to know about the tools? Do they need to know about the history? Do they need to know about the science of it? Do they need to understand the inner and outer game? Because, sometimes you can tell people, here's here's your next step in phase 1. And, they have a little fear about standing in front of a crowd or something. And if, the next step is do your speaking engagement, it won't be enough for that to tell them just how to do it. You've also got to step back and explain maybe why they might be reluctant to do it, or, how to do it successfully, or what to think about, what to talk about, how to create content, whatever. So then after I find out all of the things I think that I want them to do, then I ask, well, what do they need to know? Who do they need to be? What do they need to believe? What resources do they need to access to so that they can actually implement it? And what do they need to know about the inner game, the outer game, the theory, the practice, the top 3 steps? What do they need to know here that if they know it, they're going to be more inclined to believe that they can implement each of the how-tos? And then I step back and I say, great, so what's in it for them to learn this? Like, I know that they want to learn it, so why? What is it? Why is it important for them to know this? What are they going to get out of it? How will their experience change? And more importantly, why should they learn this from me now? Okay, I don't just want them to learn it or hear it. I want them to know why it's important for them to learn this from me specifically and right now. And so that starts to formulate the opening, or the why of the presentation, right? And of course, what's the new experience going to be? Because in the end, I'm going to talk about the application, the what if. And so I want to be able to talk about what they can expect to change, what outcome, or what new experience they will have as a result of putting this all into action. And I could talk about that not only in the why part of the opening, in the introduction, but also in the wrap-up, in the summary. And I can sort of pre-frame their experience taking this into the world. So, my sort of informal name for this is Deconstructive Creation, Constructive Presentation, because I start with deconstructing every step of the solution, and I deconstruct all the elements of that, and then I deconstruct the what and the why. But when I present it in a constructive way, like I'm constructing the solution by first introducing the why, then talking about the what, then going into the how, and then ultimately going to the what if, right? So this is the technique that I'll refer back to that video sales letter thing that we're doing now. One of the things that I helped Chris do, Chris is my friend, a copywriter whose content, the course is really based on. When we talked, he said, I got all this stuff in my head. I know how I do it, but I just don't know how to teach it, kind of thing. And so that's how I started with him. We said, okay, what we want is for people to have a high converting, money making video sales letter. So if I was your client, what would you do, or what would you tell me to do? And then we sort of broke it down step by step by step. And I said, great. Now, for each one of those steps, teach me what I need to know about that thing so that I have the ability and the confidence to do it, and show me what resources I'll need, and then give me the action step to accomplish it. And that's how we created the whole course, a 30-day workshop. And we did it Well, I think probably, 3, 4 hours, 7 modules, maybe 20, 24 hours, the whole thing, over a period of, 3 or 4 weeks. So, and by the way, that's selling like hotcakes, that course. And because it gets some serious results. Now, of course, we enveloped it. We put it in the context of some serious coaching environment, which was my part of the deal. Not only to help Chris sort of deconstruct his thinking, but also to create accountability and motivation and the coaching kind of element to the game as well. So it's a great program, but it all started with the biggest need and desire from our avatars was they didn't want to write long form sales letters because it was too complex, it cost too much, and they didn't want to hire a copywriter like Chris and pay him $30,000 to do it. They wanted to be able to blast out some really effective but simple to do and videos that they could do even if they weren't copywriters, right? And that was the starting point. And with that end in mind, with that being the avatar's biggest outcome, that's what we worked back from and created that whole 30-day program. So it's a really cool way to do it, and I recommend you give this a try as soon as you can on your next workshop. Marriott says I'm cutting off. Actually, I don't think I'm cutting off, Marriott. I think it's my voice. It's my throat that's doing that. It's not the microphone. The other thing about a lot of creating content fast is to repurpose it. And so I often call this multi-purposing, repurposing. The idea here is that you take the stuff you already created and just put it out there in a lot of different forms and formats, right? So you have to, this is tough because now here's the inner game part of this. The inner game is that we feel like we need to create a new piece of content that stands alone every single time we sit down or every time we distribute content. But you know what? It's really not true for a number of reasons. So here's why I want you to release this need to constantly create new content. Well, first of all, it's easier for you. So you can create a lot of different things. So you don't have to create an article about one topic, a video about another topic, a blog post about a third topic, and a social media Squidoo page about something else. That'll make you crazy, right? So what you want to do is you want to write about one topic and do a good job of it, and then you want to distribute it in as many different mediums as possible, or as many different media as possible. So ideally, because you're gonna reach people who consume your content in different ways too, right? So it's better for your marketing. It's better for your audience because if people happen to be the kind that prefer to read articles, they're going to read your article. If your audience tends to be on YouTube, they're going to watch your video. If your audience tends to listen to podcasts, they're going to get your iTunes feed. But it's all the same content, but you only had to create it once. So it's easier for you, it's better for your marketing, and it's helpful for your audience. And here's another thing, the big secret here is that, we have this idea that because we know all the stuff that we write, that therefore our audience knows all the stuff that we write. But they don't. They're reading lots of books from lots of people, watching lots of videos from lots of people, and if you think that they're going to hear your content once, or they're going to read your article once, or watch your video once, and they're going to remember it, I'm sorry, that just ain't going to happen. I don't care who you are, how good you are. I mean, even Elvis had to play, put his records on the radio and had to play, and they played it over and over and over again until it became ingrained in the consciousness. It wasn't the first time you heard that song that you immediately learned it, you immediately loved it. But and in fact, I say Elvis, but it's easy to like Elvis. But there's a lot of really not so great records that are out there, but they become, there's a little catchy hook or a little phrase in there or a rhythm or beat, and the more it's played, the more people start to like it and relate to it. And right? Same thing with your content. People are not going to remember it. They have to hear the same thing told to them in many different ways, told to them many different times, and told to them in many different mediums, right? I'll tell you, I have Brian Tracy's Psychology of Achievement, and I have like the original version on tape. I have some of the more recent ones too, but when I was listening to that, I think I bought everything that Brian did. I mean, I was a big fan of his, and probably the stuff that was in Psychology of Achievement, I don't know, I must have listened to that stuff hundreds of times. I mean, I'm surprised that I didn't wear right through the cassette. But you know what? Each time I heard it, I couldn't remember everything that I'd heard before, and even the things that I did hear sounded somehow different, of course, because I was different listening to it. And, and you know, I can tell you this really powerful story about what happened as a result, but I'll save that for another time. But there was one point that he talked in there, and it was about forgiveness. And for 3 years, I was going through something in my life that, had I heard that 3 years earlier, would have made a tremendous difference in my life 3 years earlier. I would not have wasted 3 years of my life. But guess what? And by the way, I was listening to those tapes for those 3 years, but it wasn't until that one day that I was ready to hear it that I happened to be playing that tape, and I got it in a big way, and my life changed, right? So you owe it to your audience to say the same thing as many times as possible in as many different mediums as you can, in as many different ways as you can. So it's really easy to say the same thing in many different ways from many different perspectives. Now that you know these frameworks, one time you can talk about the why, what, how, what, if. Another time the inner outer game. Another time about the top 3 things they need to know. Another thing, I mean, you're saying the same thing in many different ways. And you know what? It's easier for you. It's better for your marketing, and most of all, it's awesome for your audience. So whenever you feel like you need to create something new every time you put out new content, ask yourself, what have I already talked about that I'm really that my audience really wants to know about, and how can I bring a new perspective, a new dialogue, a new solution, a new angle to this, so that maybe someone who didn't hear it the first time I said it now is going to get it. Because maybe all I need to do is I presented it in an auditory format. Maybe I'll repurpose it into a visual so that somebody who's a visual learner will get it this time. Or maybe I'll just say, here's the exercise or the action guide that goes along with this article, so that people who are kinesthetic or experiential or how-to people can get it in a way that they couldn't get it before, right? So you can really make a much better impact, much bigger impact, if you choose to repurpose, right? So one thing that you might want to think about if you do repurpose is that you'll get the most leverage when you speak your content originally, or if you screencast or produce it on video. So in other words, if you write it, then someone else is you're gonna have to go back and read it to create the audio, or you're gonna have to go back and videotape it to create the video element of it. But if you start with the video and the audio, it's really easy then to turn that media into video only, into audio only, into transcripts. You can outsource all of the repurposing. But if you start with an article, it's hard to outsource all of the audio and the video and the stuff, because you're going to be involved, right? So by definition, you have to go do it again. So if you start with the audio or hopefully preferably the video, then people can take your stuff and turn it into transcripts, blog posts, podcasts, YouTube videos. They can turn it into series and articles, series and modules and gates and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to be involved, and you're going to reach a much broader audience. Now, obviously, in this case, I'm talking primarily about content marketing, but it applies also to your products and services. Some people are going to learn best from you by watching something on the screen, or maybe seeing you in person. Some people are going to prefer to listen to the audio of the stuff you teach. Some people need exercises to get hands-on and implement the stuff that you teach, right? So you can repurpose. If you create the video and the audio in the first place, you can repurpose all of those things, and your products become that much better, because editors and writers and media people can take your original content and turn it into a whole bunch of other stuff magically. And it's a little bit harder the other way around, because you need to get back involved to produce the media if you start with paper, or if you start with like a text file. Okay, so something to keep in mind whenever possible. And by the way, the other part of this that's really cool is that you'll start to speak your content. And your content will start to have your voice, your natural speaking voice. So instead of looking like a university exam paper or a high school exam paper, it's going to feel like a natural conversation. And your personality is going to shine through. Your energy is going to be there. And believe it or not, outsourcers will translate that in the way that they edit it, because it'll be your words and your energy, and they'll maintain that. So it's not only faster, but you'll be more creative. You'll find that you're giving better solutions more naturally, And because it's not scripted and because you're not, worried about every word in editing and, rearranging paragraphs and all that stuff, a few bullet points and just speak from your heart, just like we're doing here tonight. And you're going to have a lot of great content that can reach a lot of people. So just if in case you haven't done this before, I'm just going to talk real briefly about some of the tools that I think are kind of essential to doing this. If you're going to do this screen or video or whatever thing, to create your original content. So the two pieces of software that I use probably 90% of the day. Well, right now I'm using mostly ScreenFlow because I'm working from a Mac. But when I was on the PC, I would use Camtasia. One of my favorite tools of all time, that Camtasia for the PC. It's not as good on the Mac. Camtasia is a whole different beast on the Mac. So I like ScreenFlow better on the Mac. But this allows you to do either voice recording, it allows you to do a screen capture recording, it allows you to record your video or your webcam, and then you can edit it and produce it so that it can be published on the web very easily. ScreenFlow for the Mac is like $99, and Camtasia I think is $299, so it's a bit pricier, but well worth it if you're going to do a lot of content creation. Now, I used to record everything on the phone, but what I find is that it just gives a whole different experience, and it's a lot better perceived value if I use a microphone, like a studio style microphone. So, for example, now you're listening to me tonight. If you're on the call, you're going to hear me over the phone. But when you go back and listen to the replay, it's almost like I'm in the studio, right? You can hear my natural speaking voice, and that's because I'm using a microphone here, like a studio style microphone, to do the recording and actually feed my voice into the phone. So, we have a backup. If anything were ever to happen here, we could get the teleconference recording and put it into the video, or maybe just put it up online, but it would sound like a telephone, right? And you can get actually these days, with voice over IP, some quality is pretty good. You can almost sound, almost like a real voice. But of course, when you're using a real microphone, and recording it directly into your PC, you're going to get much higher quality. So I do recommend that you look at getting a high quality USB mic. Now I'm actually using a very complex setup here, but until recently I was just using the Samson CO3U mic that I would just plug into my USB port, turn on my ScreenFlow or my Camtasia, whatever I was using, and talk away. And it's just that simple. A lot of folks I know, a lot of my colleagues and friends use the Audio Technica 2020 microphone. They like that. And lately, there's been a big hullabaloo about this new microphone by Blue, this company called Blue, and it's called the Yeti mic. And again, more or less, these are all about $100 each. So not a very expensive solution. If you do want to use teleconference recording, now why would you want to do this? Well, first of all, sometimes you're doing a teleconference and you need to be able to do a teleconference. If you're doing an interview or you're interviewing a guest, well, you may as well, you're going to be on the phone, so you may as well have a teleconference system that has good quality audio recording. The other part about this is that a lot of people feel somehow more comfortable talking on a phone to someone else than they do talking into a mic, believe it or not. So, there's a lot of reasons to do that. And what I recommend you do, whether or not, use it for this purpose, or if you use it to do your presentations and all that kind of stuff, I don't go into a whole lot of depth, but there's a ton of good reasons why we use carefreeconferencecalls.com. And if you want to give it a go, play around with it, see how you like it, you can access this link, carefreeconferencecalls.com/free trial, and that's my private label of the Instant Teleseminar service, and anybody who signs up on my account, on my private label, will actually get 3 months trial instead of the 1, and you'll have a lot of time to play with it. Now, the really great thing about this is I don't want to go into all the technology behind it, but I know Rick Raditz, and we've talked a lot, and he's a geek and I'm a geek, and so and I come from the telecommunications world, so I understand a lot of that technology, and I can tell you that there's no other teleconferencing system out there that works as hard to be as reliable and as high fidelity in terms of reproduction as this particular service does. And and if you compare the quality of the recordings from this and any other conferencing system, it's audible. I mean, you can literally hear the difference in the quality, and there's no drops, no cutoffs, no blips, no nothing. So it's actually great for recording. But even more importantly, In my coaching groups, for example, what I'll do is I'll go through Q&A round robin sometimes in the coaching groups, and we do it through Carefree conference calls. And what I will do is I will start the recording when I'm speaking to one person or I'm helping one person, and then when we're done, I'll stop the recording and start it up again, and then the next person, and then stop it and start it up. And you know what? By the time I hang up the phone, I copy and paste a patch of code, and every one of those conversations is produced as a separate track and a downloadable link that I just copy and paste and produce it into my members area. And you know, in the past, I would have to download that, open the file, you know, fix the audio, edit the different pieces, find out where in the audio I needed to separate the track, produce each individual track, upload each individual track, get a separate player, you know, the code for each every. I mean, it was a nightmare. It would take me like 3 hours. And now I just copy and paste. So you can do this also on your website, you know, and not only the audio portion of it, but this service does happen to also have slide presentations. So if you want to record a slide presentation and capture it for instant playback on your blog, and then use ScreenFlow to capture it so that you can produce it on and have it multi-purposed everywhere else, you literally don't need any other tools, right? So I mean, you can do this for as little as $27 a month. The basic package is $27 a month, and you'll get, you know, 100 people on the line and 2,000 people on the webcast. So you can do great big events and have all of the registration and replay done for you. So highly recommend for a lot of reasons that you give this a go. But fantastic tool for quick content production and reproduction. Now, insofar as actual writing, or you know, if you're doing a slideshow or things like that, so you know, it's probably a good idea to have some kind of WordPress or word processor or slideshow software. And of course, most people on the PC will use PowerPoint and Word from the Office suite, and lots of folks on the Macs will use Keynote as their slide presentation software, and Pages as their Word document. If you don't have either one of those, you don't pay for either one of those, you could try openoffice.org. I understand that they actually have a lot of good free software. I don't know how compatible it really is with the other stuff, but it doesn't matter. I mean, if that's all you're using, it's good enough, right? You can create slideshows and you can create documents out of that. That's perfect. But the other thing you might want to try is if you have if you have a Gmail account, or you just want to open a Google document account. This is really cool. The Google Docs is an online shared document server that you can access, and it'll create, I mean, it's not elaborate as highly functional as Word or PowerPoint, but you know, for what you need, what we need to create content, it's pretty good. You know, you could do a great slideshow using Google Documents and record it on ScreenFlow. Nobody would know you're using Google Docs and not PowerPoint. You know, again, you can't get really fancy, and there's not a whole lot of animation and all that kind of good stuff. But you know, for your basic, you know, solid, good-looking presentation, it's a great free alternative for content creation. Now, another thing that's really handy is if you're wanting to create transcripts and PDF files, reports, that kind of thing, then you want to have some kind of PDF creator. Now, you can Google for PDF, you know, Google for free PDF creation software. There's tons of it on the web. The only thing you want to do is test it to make sure that when you use it, that it actually preserves the hyperlinks in your document. So you might be using like an OpenOffice, well actually OpenOffice.org, the word processor there actually outputs in PDF format, so you don't need a separate one. And the same is true on the Mac. The printer driver actually gives you the option to produce a PDF file. But if you're on the PC, then you can find, you know, $20, $30 piece of software or a free piece of software that'll create PDFs. Just be sure that you know, you're going to want links back to your site, and links to your opt-in pages, and links to your sales pages, and all of these things. So you want to make sure that they're live when the PDF is produced. Then you should, of course, get a little bit of web hosting. So if you're doing anything public, like if you're doing content marketing, well, you know, get a WordPress blog. That's free. Upload your stuff to your audio to podcast directories. That's free. Upload your video using TubeMogul to to YouTube and Google Video and Vidler and Vimeo and all of those things. That's free. You know, social media, it's free. Upload your video to Facebook. You're in great shape, right? So lots of options for distributing your content once it's created on a lot of free and other social marketing sites as well. If it's product that is paid for or you want to restrict access to, then you're probably going to want to use Amazon S3 or some other private content delivery network or CDN. So video they're fairly big files, and if you have a lot of people accessing them at once, you don't want your web hosting to crash. And your normal $8 or $9 or $10 a month web hosting, it has its limits. You don't want you don't want to get in trouble with your hosting provider who says, hey, you're using all my bandwidth, kind of thing. And of course, in a shared hosting, you don't have exclusive control of the processor, so your visitors might see a lot of stutter and stammer on their videos and all that kind of thing. So you don't want to worry about that. So get an Amazon S3 account to host all your media and to deliver all your media. And or if you don't want Amazon S3, there's other content delivery networks that will do that for you. But I just found S3 tends to be the cheapest one of the bunch right now. And it's awesome. I mean, infrastructure, backup, reliability, the whole thing is great, and it's really low prices. In fact, I think a lot of the places, the content delivery networks that you can access, use an S3 backbone, and they just charge you more to use their private label. So ultimately, a lot of the world is on S3, whether you're aware of it or not. And then the thing that I mentioned before was this mind map software. So this is really great for creating. I actually have I use MindJet. Okay, that's a paid version, but there is a thing out there called FreeMind, which is great. It's perfect for what we need to do here. It's functional and free, so you can't get any better than that. And actually, I'm not sure if it'll work on the Mac. I think so, but suffice it to say, there's some free mind mapping software that you can use, because you don't need it to be really fancy or anything. But what that helps with is that you can sort of free form the structure of it and experiment with, okay, do I want to do a how, a why, a what if here? Do I? And what I've actually done is I've created, I forget what they call them, like templates, right? So I have one template, which is the 4 learning styles template. I have another one, which is the top 10 template. I have another one, which is the modular template. Sometimes I'll just open that template and start filling in the blanks. So it's a great way to really stimulate your thinking and get a good quick start on that. So I recommend you give that a try. If you're not familiar with mind map software, it's pretty functional, and you can get it free now. So it's a great time to try it. So for getting your content out there, once you've created all this great content, and we're going to talk about these things later as we go in more depth, but basically, your blog is probably the first place you want to put most of this stuff. That way you establish that it's, you're the first person with the content on the web. Chances are it's your content. And of course, especially if it's authoritative content or high value content, it's great for people to come to your blog and see it or download it from there, opt in, whatever else. So that's a great place to start. You can then use TubeMogul, which is the I call it the baby brother of Traffic Geyser, but it basically means that TubeMogul is essentially free. I mean, they have a premium version that's a slightly more expensive, but Traffic Geyser is the Cadillac. So if you're going to go full bore into repurposing and redistributing your content, either one of these things will be great. Traffic Geyser has a lot more features and functions, but it is somewhere between $97 and $297 a month, I think. Whereas TubeMogul, you can get started for free. So maybe you start with TubeMogul, get your process figured out, get efficient at it, and then when you start to see the benefits of it, and you know what you're doing, then you can start really pumping it up with Traffic Geyser. Of course, if it's written, you want to drop a copy in eZine Articles and Go Articles. Now, a lot of people say, you should put your stuff in hundreds of different articles. I talked to Chris Knight, who's the publisher of eZine Articles, and he basically says, eZine Articles, Go Articles, and I think he said there was one more. I can't remember it right now. If you do that, you've covered about 80 to 90% of all of the articles, and you have the highest reputation sites. So, I figure, hey, if I only have to post to 3 places and get the benefit of 90% of all of the internet marketing world, why not? So I typically just post to eZine Articles and Go Articles. Again, I don't write a lot of articles, but that's what my clients who do write articles do. And social media, of course, right? If you have an auto submitter for social media, like Ping FM or Postgres or something like that, you can get your content out to your to your websites, to your Squidoo pages, to your hub pages, to your Twitter feed, to your Facebook feed, all in one shot. And hey, do a press release. If it's a really good article or something innovative and interesting and might catch the attention of the media, why not let them know where to get it and offer them to reproduce it? Okay, so if you're going to deliver paid content, of course, one of the things that you might want to consider is the Office Autopilot software, which now Evan is starting to use in his company, and I think he has a strategic relationship with Office Autopilot. I'm just learning. I just got an account, so I'm just going to dig in and find out how all this stuff works. So I can't say yet anything about Office Autopilot, but hopefully I will in days to come. But the team at Evan's company really loves it, and Evan likes it a lot, and he knows the folks who are doing it. It's an all-in-one e-commerce suite that does a whole lot of great tracking. And from what I understand, it integrates really nicely with WordPress, so you don't have to worry about your own installation of WordPress, keeping it up to date, the plugins, the membership stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an interesting twist to an all-in-one e-commerce suite. So that's one option, and of course it will protect content and deliver it only to paid members, and it'll do the e-commerce transaction for you. Now, if you want to do this with WordPress, you get a copy of WordPress, and there's 2 or 3 membership plugins that you can look at. One is Wishlist Member, one is Digital Access Pass, one is Extreme Member. There's a bunch of them. I happen to use Wishlist Member when I do this, but Wishlist or Digital Access Pass are both great. A-Member, a lot of people still like to use A-Member. I think it's a little bit outdated, a little bit technical to use. I like Wishlist and Member, but it's fine. A lot of people using it, and it integrates nicely with the next e-commerce site, which is One Shopping Cart. So One Shopping Cart is, for people getting started who want an all-in-one suite for $99 a month, or I guess if you pay for the year, you save it, it'll be like $80 a month or something. It's pretty darn good. I mean, it'll do your shopping cart, your digital delivery, your affiliate program, the whole kit and caboodle. So that'll make sure that only the people who paid to get your content will have access to it. And then, if you don't want to use all that, then all you have to do is go into your cPanel and create a folder where you put your download files in, assign a password to that folder, and then give people a link to that folder with the password. Once they pay for it, in their receipt, just say, thanks for your purchase, here's the link to download your stuff, and by the way, here's the password. So, you can get really basic, really simple. It all works pretty well. Now, if you do get stuck for ideas, and sometimes we do, or if you're just doing the research for your market, I really recommend the easiest way to get an endless source of inspiration and ideas is to create that listening station that we talked about maybe last week or the week before. I can't remember right now. So this is where you can get all the article directories, blogs, news, RSS feeds, whatever, coming straight into your Google Reader, and just spend 20 minutes a week going through that. And what you'll be able to do is find out what everybody else is writing about, and you'll find out also how popular the response is to those articles. If they are on Digg and they got a lot of digs, that's very popular. If it's in an article directory and it has a lot of views, that that's a very popular topic. So not only does it give you an idea of the various things that you can talk about, but it also gives you an idea of how popular those things are, so you can prioritize and choose which ones you want to bring your expertise to. Now, I'm not recommending that you copy these things. What I'm saying is that you look at the subject matter and you then say, hey, I have an opinion on that, or I have a perspective on that, or I have a unique solution on that, and that's what you write. Okay, so I'm not saying this is not about copy and pasting or spinning an article or anything like that. This is about finding out what the discussion is in your marketplace, what problems, solutions, what things people in your marketplace are talking about the most, that they're most wanting to achieve or solve, and this is a good source of determining what those are, and then you write the content. It's all original content from you, okay? And you can subscribe to all the most popular industry sources that have RSS feeds. So you go into your trade journals, your magazines, your news sites, your article directories, your video, all of those places like we talked about. And by the way, if you didn't see that, please do go watch that training, because it's it's one of the greatest leverage tools that you'll ever put together for yourself. Dead simple to do, and you'll have your pulse on the market like with 20 minutes, 30 minutes of work a week. So you just subscribe to them all and then scan them for headlines, look for popularity, and keep a list. Just keep a list of ideas of stuff that you want to write about. So when you're stuck, just pull out your list and go, oh yeah, I wanted to talk about this one day, and off you go. And you'll be hard pressed to keep up with all the ideas you have about about what to write about, or not necessarily write, but what to create content on. Now, in terms of creative flow, I'm going to call this. I think there's a myth, that people think that you have to wait until you're inspired before you can create content or you can write. It's not been my experience, although I do love to write when I'm inspired. It's a great feeling. But, I find that business doesn't really allow that, because there are deadlines and promises and customers waiting for stuff. And so I can't wait until I'm inspired. I have to create inspiration. And one of the best ways I know to do that is to have discipline, right? To set aside time when I do nothing but dedicate that time to creating product or content or whatever. So, forget the myth of inspiration or the idea that you have to wait for inspiration. It's a myth. Discipline trumps inspiration every time. If you get yourself in the routine and the habit and the ritual of scheduling time and giving yourself a nice creative space to write in, to relax in, and to get into the flow, you have the list of frameworks and the list of topics from your Google Reader, from your listening station, you're going to create more content that you can shake a stick at, I promise you. And even in those days where you have those blank screen things going on, you'll find that you can get over that sooner and sooner and sooner. But here's the thing: discipline sort of relies on your willpower, doesn't it? And we've heard, Evan talk about it, and Tony Schwartz talk about it. Willpower is one of those scarce resources that we shouldn't apply willy-nilly. And why apply it to, applying willpower so that we will actually discipline ourselves to write or to create content? So what I found is that accountability trumps discipline every time, right? Willpower is a very scarce resource. We should apply it to only important things. We don't have a lot of it, and the truth is we're not real good at it anyway, are we? I mean, think about how much willpower it takes, to not eat that donut. And, I don't know about you, but 9 times out of 10, I somehow talk myself into eating it, right? So it's better if I have an accountability buddy that kind of walks over to the fridge and tosses the donut out, or at the very least says, hey, tomorrow we're going to the gym so you can work off that donut, right? So accountability trumps discipline, trumps willpower in my experience every time. But inevitability trumps even accountability. And what's inevitability for me, when it comes to content creation, is, for me, I like to sell stuff before I create it, because then I feel like I have no choice. I've got to get that stuff done. And so, I put the processes in place. I organize my calendar. I get the tools set up. I do the research. I get myself really in a position where my rituals, my structures, my mindset, and the fact that I know that there's people on the other end, there are clients on the other end waiting for this stuff, makes it inevitable that I'm going to get that stuff done. Inspiration is a myth. Discipline trumps inspiration. Accountability trumps discipline, and inevitability trumps accountability. So we talked about inevitability a little bit when we talked about productivity tips, and so it's really it's one of those things that's made a huge leverage difference for me in the last couple of years. Since I sort of was introduced to it through I think through Wake Up Productive, and it might have been in an earlier Guru Mastermind as well. But this is really a game changer. So the more you can have other people counting on you to deliver, and the more skin you have in the game, listen, you'll find amazing ways to create content. Trust me. Like my inevitability is Monday night, you guys are sitting here waiting for this training. And do I have a choice? Listen, I got myself out of a deathbed, and I sat down and researched for like 4 hours today, came back from the dentist, did a client call, and then I knew you guys were here. So what did I do? Shut the phones down, closed the doors, told everybody stop calling, turned down my email, brought up the research, did the video, went through my frameworks, and boom, I've got a presentation for you tonight. Because what can I do? You're here. I've got to do it. So I make it inevitable that I put the structures and processes in place for this to happen. So and for our training course, you've probably heard me say this before. If you're not new to me, you've heard me say it. If you're new to me, I'm going to introduce the concept of, very rarely do I sell a product that's created nowadays. Most of what I sell are 30-day workshops, and the first time we do it, it doesn't exist. I create it after we sell people into the course. Now, if it turns out we don't have a good enrollment, then I'll just cancel it. But if there is a good enrollment, I'm not happy about returning people's money, and not because of the money necessarily, although that's an issue, of course. But I don't want to have to tell people that, hey, sorry, I'm not going to deliver your stuff. Here's your money, and I don't want them to be unhappy. I want them to have a positive experience. So once people pay money and expect a high quality experience, man, I do everything. I mean, I reorganize my life every way I can to make sure that that happens. So it becomes inevitable. Content creation, frameworks, knowing your avatar, and making it inevitable. That's the magic recipe. And I would encourage you to see how many different ways you can think of to make your content creation inevitable. So here's a couple of fast content tweaks from productivity point of view. Batch your writing times. So don't just write an article now and then an article tomorrow, and then when you get around to it, like actually put it in your calendar. For me, for example, Monday afternoons and Thursday afternoons are my content creation time. And I won't even take clients during that call if I can avoid it. I mean, sometimes I have to, but 90% of the time, uninterrupted. That's it. Those are my content creation times. And so, that's my mind kicks into content creation mode. And, I will write everything that I need to, or as much as I can during those times. I'll write, course content, training content for Action Guru. I'll write client stuff. I'll write, screencasts or trainings or whatever. It all happens pretty much in those times. So I batch those times. And if possible, I'll do all one kind of production at a time, because the tools and the setup that I need to write an article or a blog post or an email or an autoresponder series is different than the tools and the setup that I need to record a screencast. So if I can record 8 screencasts in an hour and then 20 articles or 20 autoresponders in the next hour, that's going to happen a lot more easily than writing one article, then one screencast, and then one blog post, and then one, what I mean. So batch your writing times, not only in terms of the hours that you allocate for it, but in terms of, you remember we talked about the 60-60-30 process, right? So each one of those 60-minute blocks, make it about one kind of media production, and you'll leverage your results there. Of course, I always like to speak my writing. I haven't, I don't say I have an aversion, because I'm a pretty good writer and I like writing, but when it comes to content creation, I don't like to write, because what I find is my editing mind, my critical mind, comes into play way more than it needs to. So when I'm speaking, I'm finding that I'm not sitting there thinking about, okay, what's the sentence structure here? Is this the right thing to say? Was that the right word? Could I have phrased it a little bit differently? So I'm not in that logical, analytical mind. I'm more in the, hey, I'm out here to solve a problem mind, and the content comes out better. So I like to speak my content and then have it transcribed or recorded or whatever. And of course, you could outsource that as well. You could speak your writing into a transcription service and have them do the content creation. You could get either Carefree conference calls or just a free conference line, pick up the phone and talk into it, and then hire somebody for $15 an hour to go, or well, maybe a little bit more, $20, $25 an hour to go read to go listen to your voicemail and just transcribe the whole thing for you, turn them into articles for you, right? So there's a lot of ways you can do this. For me, I can get way more done if I speak it, and I think it comes out better than if I write it. Like, it literally can take me 3 or 4 hours to write an email sometimes that I could have knocked off. You ever notice when you're leaving a voicemail that sometimes it takes you 30 seconds to leave a voicemail, but if you would have written that email, it would have taken you 10 minutes. Same kind of thing, right? So for me, it's much easier to speak. Repurposing, and by the way, speaking is easier than video recording, because now I don't have all the complications of slideshows and screen recordings and all that kind of stuff. I basically fire up my mic, turn on the recorder, and I talk, right? So that's the easiest way for me personally to do it. And then repurpose. Please don't repurpose yourself. It's, just create new content and have someone else repurpose all your new content. You'll get a lot more reach and a lot more benefit out of it. Repurposing that stuff is literally $10, $15 an hour work on Odesk or Elance or Craigslist. So please don't do that yourself. If you are writing, or if you are creating the audio or scripting or the video or something, what I recommend is that you do the creation first and the editing later as separate steps. I find that when I try to do the editing as I'm creating that, the creative part of my brain likes to use the left side of the right side of my brain, and then the critical editing analytical part likes to use the left side of my brain, and they fight. So I prefer to just say, okay, Mr. Editor, you'll have your chance, just sit tight, and then go totally creative, and get all the ideas down, and don't worry about the format or the structure or the pace or anything else, and then fix that all afterwards in the editing. So I find that that's a nice little tweak that'll help you get stuff done faster. Please outsource your transcription. Don't even consider doing it yourself. And as I said, outsource your repurposing. And by repurposing, I mean not only putting it into other formats, but distributing those formats online for you as well. Okay, so action steps. Well, we've talked a lot about frameworks and mindset and avatars and purpose and milestones and all that good stuff, right? So now's the time to put it into action. So listen, why do you want to put this into action? We covered it before, right? Content is currency, and the more of your stuff you can get out there, if you're doing information marketing online, and if you want to reach a lot of people through content marketing, you've got to create a lot of content fast. So just imagine all the people that you will be able to help, and how many more you'll be able to help. Imagine how much better you're going to feel about your work and your ability to create this stuff. Imagine how much more competent you're going to feel at being able to produce a lot of good stuff. Imagine what it's going to feel like when your clients clamor to get the content you create because it's valuable and relevant to them. Okay, so you know what? There's absolutely no downside, all upside to this. You're gonna reach out. You're gonna serve a lot more people. You accomplish everything you want. Your business will grow. You're gonna have new joint venture partners. And guess what? You'll have the freedom of the lifestyle you want and the time to enjoy it. Because why? You're outsourcing all that stuff, aren't you? So remember, it's better for you. It's better for your marketing. And it's better for for the people you want to help, for the people you serve. So please think about doing this in the next month. I'd like you to think about this as a sort of a month-long project. So first of all, identify the top 1 to 3 fears and frustrations, needs and desires of your ideal customer. So if you only want to do one, that's fine. If it's enough to create a good piece of content that you want, good. If you want to work on 3, work on 3. But for now, especially if you're just kind of working through this, don't do more than 3, because I don't want you to get overwhelmed and stuck and all that kind of stuff, right? I want you to master and learn this, and I want you to really get the hang of the frameworks and using them. So identify what you know to be, or at least your best guess at the top 1 to 3 fears and frustrations and needs and desires of your ideal customers. Then I want you to use that deconstruction construction process, and I want you to develop your best solution. And I mean your best solution. Don't just pretend that you're giving the answer here. Pretend this is a real client paying you to give them a solution. Give it your best, like really the things that you would tell them to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3, and teach them why they need to do it and what's in it for them and what this thing is that they're learning and what it does in their life and so on. Like, go through and really be of service. Just give it what you got, right? And then see if you can practice using 1, 2, or 3 of the frameworks. I highly recommend you try it with the why, what, how, what if format, because frankly, that's probably where I start 98% of my stuff. After I've done the deconstruction construction. Actually, sometimes I don't have to do deconstruction construction because it's not a big complex thing, but the why, what, how, what if always plays a role somehow. So I really recommend you practice that. And then of course you could try the top XYZ, and if you're into it, the inner and outer game is a great thing to blend in. Okay, so just kind of have fun with it, blend them one and the other, use them, and remember, separate the creation from the editing. So when you're creating it, toss in a whole bunch of why, what, how, what ifs in the middle of a top 10 just to see what it's going to look like. You may surprise yourself what comes up. Okay, so develop your best solutions and put it into a framework, and then produce, repurpose, and distribute that training, that content in the most impactful way that you can think of. So what I mean by that is, if you think that the most impactful way for you to use that and distribute it is as an opt-in incentive, then that's what I want you to do. And if you think that the most impactful way you can do it is to outsource and break it into a series of like 7 videos and send the audio to the podcasting, the transcriptions to article directories, and the videos to your YouTube directories, then do that. If you think that it's best used as a piece of content that you want people to pay for, that's how it's going to be most impactful to you, then do that. Okay, I'm not going to tell you how to use it in your business, because you will know best how it's going to benefit you most. And that's what I want you to do. The important thing is I want you to practice creating great content fast. And in particular, if you can, sell the thing or promise it to your list, and watch how quickly you'll get it done. If you promise something to your list and say, I'm writing a report on XYZ, I'm going to sell it for $97, but you know what? If you hold me accountable to getting this done and sign up for this saying that you want it, as long as there are 20 of you, I will give it to you free. You know what? You get 20 people who want this thing at the end of the month. You're going to get it done. Free or not, So think about creating some kind of inevitability, and then tell us about your success in a coaching call before the end of this month. Okay, so let's really reinforce, celebrate, and acknowledge you for doing this. I'll leave it to you to decide what the best use of it is, how you get most leverage out of it, and so on. And during the coaching calls, as you're implementing, feel free to come on the calls and say, hey, I'm looking for an outsourcer. Where do I look? Or how does this tool work? Or whatever else. We're here to help you to make it work. Okay, so let me think. There's a couple of questions here I think I can handle real quick, and then we're going to close because we are 2 hours into it, so I'm going to have to motor. So let's just step back here for a quick second. So let's see. Cindy says, literally need to know the tools to put out the content, how to record, how to transcribe, shoot video, file. Okay, so obviously this is not the place for that training. We'll see if we can do that later on, but you're going to have to probably work a little bit on those tools. Try some of the training, like Camtasia and ScreenFlow have awesome training tutorials, and most of them do. And then, as time goes by, as we do more product creation and more tech training calls, we'll get a chance to do a little bit more hands-on for you as well. But I mean, obviously, we've already been here 2 hours. I couldn't get into technology, although that's some of the stuff I love to do most. Because why? Because I'm a how person. So, okay. And then Pam says, Carefree conference calls, free trial goes to Secure Talk, X-Talk. Yeah, that's okay. That's fine, Pam. That's just a redirect to the Instant Teleseminar site, so that's perfectly okay. Go ahead and sign up, and as soon as I get the registration, I'll have them update you to 3 months. Pam says, offering a 30-day, is there some place that makes sense, that makes it clear you are offering 90 days? I'm not offering 90 days. Sorry, Pam, I'm not sure what your question is. Is there some place that makes it clear you are offering 90 days? Okay, go ahead and clarify that for me, Pam, if you would. And then Cindy says, BuddyPress is a great WordPress system. Yeah, it is, Cindy, and BuddyPress is more about the connection of your members, right? It's kind of a social plugin where people can have profiles and blogs and connect with each other. And so that's interesting in terms of user-generated content, right? Which is a great way to generate content. And if that happens to be a public blog, that's fantastic for you. So good idea there. I hadn't thought about that as a content generation system, but I see that it can be. What kind of transcription service, where to find? Hey, I still use Odesk. It's if you go to odesk.com, O-D-E-S-K, I freelance, I outsource all of my transcription, and I literally can find myself paying $20 to $25 per audio hour. There are a lot of people transcribing and doing great jobs there. I mean, you can find anything from $25 to $100 an hour, but look at the freelancers, look at their history and whatever, and make a choice. But it's really affordable, and there's lots of people who will bid for that work, and that's at Odesk, O-D-E-S-K.com. What else? Good for mind map. Bubble.us, and it's free. Oh, okay. Thanks, Mariette. I have heard of that. I haven't tried it yet, though, but I know folks will like it. So if you're looking for a mind map, I think that's done through a browser, right? It's not a desktop application, if I remember correctly. But anyway, Bubble, B-U-B-B-L-E.us. Give it a shot. Play around and see if that works for you. Thanks, Mariette. Ben says, I heard good for Samasource for transcription. Overseas nonprofit. Okay, so for those of you looking for a transcription resource, Ben suggests Samasource. S like Sam, A-M like Mary, A source. S-A-M-A source. And I'm imagining, Ben, you mean that is samasource.com, perhaps, an overseas nonprofit. Excellent. I'm going to have to look into that, Ben. Thanks for that. And, oh, that was bad. Okay. And that is it. We're done. No more questions. Nate, I see your hand, but I'm going to ask you to wait until the coaching call because I know you and I like to get into this discussion. And I'm dying to hear how your meetup went. But I'm going to ask you to just come on Thursday if you don't mind. And let's talk about it then. Time to let June get some Betty by here. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate you being here. Listen, I say this all the time. I really mean it. Your being here allows me to do work that I love. You know, it's fun and fulfilling for me. Love to be in this conversation with you. You have great energy. You create this amazing space for me to show up and have fun with you and hopefully share some ideas. And I look forward to connecting with you in a lot of different ways very often. So thanks for being here. I'll catch you on Thursday, God willing. And till then, have a great night. Thank you. Good night. Namaste.